Good afternoon, everybody. For those who are joining us on this webinar this afternoon, we're just waiting for a couple of minutes so that people can join and sign in and sort out any problems that they may have. I'm Alex, this is Chris. We've got Ben online here. I'll do some further introductions on the other side of this little video that we're going to run in a minute or so. Just give it 30 seconds or so, or a minute more to give people time to join in. This is our third Whisky Cask Club webinar, the first this half of the year. So we're delighted to see everyone this afternoon, and we've got lots of people joining in now, as we can see. So what we're going to do is we're going to run our little video, and we'll start the webinar. This video is only like a minute or so, so please sit back and enjoy, and welcome to the show.
In a £90 billion worldwide market, single malt Scotch whisky is the best of the best. But with only 130 distilleries, global demand is 5 times annual supply, so prices are rising by 15 to 18% per year. The Whisky Cask Club is a Singapore-based company with 50 years of experience in the whisky industry. We'd love to discuss the different investment options and help you get a taste for this lucrative opportunity.
So as I said, it was a very short video, but thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name is Alexander Knight. I'm the CEO of Whisky Cask Club. Sat next to me is Christopher Brankin, who's COO. Online is Benjamin Pippin, who's sales director, and he's up in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And in the background, hopefully somewhere, is Steve Bailey from Melbourne office.
There he is.
There he is.
Looks like I need to get a new photo. I'm a little fuzzy in that one.
Yes, particularly to match the new facial hair too. So we'll leap into it. The reason that we're here this afternoon is because I want to share the joy and the benefits of Whisky Cask investing with you. It's a really interesting business, and it's been around for a very, very long time, for hundreds of years. In the last 30, 40 years, it's been internationalized a lot more, and the world of Whisky Cask investment has become even more lucrative as developing countries turn into developed countries, and where demand is increasing at such an enormous rate globally, that it's now known as liquid gold, which it really is, because but unlike gold, it's something that is not a finite resource, which makes it even more fun. The charm and charisma of Scottish whisky is known to many. The history is varied and incredibly long. As I was saying, we're based here in Singapore. It is one of the transshipment points for whisky, and it's one of the biggest importers of whisky in the world. Scottish whisky is obviously unique and is the granddaddy of all whisky. Whisky is made in over 100 countries globally, from Australia to Switzerland to even England. We make it in England now too. Singapore makes whiskey, although it's not that great. They make gin too. But so what makes Scotch whisky so different? The likes of Japan and Taiwan have amazing whiskey. Obviously, the United States has its own fabulous whiskies, and so do the Irish. And what makes Scotch whisky so it's something that is it's like Parma ham in many respects, that it's protected, and Scotch whisky can only be made in Scotland, and it has to be matured in Scotland and bottled in Scotland. They take real pride in the production of Scotch whisky, and it's really beneficial for us that they do, because it is such an amazing product that's loved by millions of people all over the world on a daily basis. People have been buying whiskey in pretty much in its present format for a couple of 100 years. So what is making it better is tweaking processes a little bit here and there, but very gently, so that they're more or less imperceptible. Coming up with eco-friendly ways of distilling and cooking the component parts of it. It's all this sort of experience that goes into creating some of the most fantastic nectar in the whole world. This is why it is different. This is why it is so unique, and this is why it will always remain the best whiskey on the planet.
Well, again, and it's been a transformational, kind of last 20 years, and the demand has gone nothing but up. And that's where opportunities for investors like yourselves through the Whisky Cask Club are really coming into existence. So, and I love this chart here. It's because we talk about demand, and realistically, the only really significant drop-offs in demand, Alex, looks like WW1 and WW2.
It's true, and the reason for that is because the men who were working in the distilleries and harvesting the crops to make the whiskey all went to war. But even if they were working, would have been impossible for them to export any of it, because, as everyone knows, the UK is an island in the middle of the North Atlantic.
Probably a number of those soldiers were the drinkers of that whiskey as well.
Exactly. But it was impossible to export any of it because of, global war. So really, the only time demand really ever drops is in terms of global conflict. Fortunately, for the last 80 odd years or 75 years, there hasn't been anything like that going on. The amount of distilleries has been expanding, as you can see there, and as is demand. So it's a really fascinating history in terms of when there were various tax acts and making sure that whiskey is made properly and not bootlegged and dragging people into the new world, so to speak, when it needed to be standardized so people weren't going to get ill from it. And it's just evolved ever since that. The video that started this presentation said 131 distilleries. There are actually now 151 because that video is a little bit old. It's interesting in the fact that because supply is such that there is a scramble to open new distilleries in Scotland, but getting a distillery open and production running takes an enormous amount of time and energy and effort.
And money.
And money. And so that leads us to what are Whisky Cask investments and why invest in them. It's the thing is that whiskey it matures in the cask. So this is another reason that these new distilleries have to take so long to get up to speed, is because once the new make whiskey, the clear liquid, comes from the stills, it has to go into barrels to be matured, and they then it has to wait 3 years before it actually can be called whiskey. So, as many of you will know, when you go into a shop to buy whiskey, you can buy unaged whiskey, as in whiskey that doesn't have an age on it, for a certain price. A 10-year-old will be probably double the price. 18-year-old probably double that again. So that gives you it's not entirely linear, but it gives you a very good example of why whiskey casks increase in value. It's interesting also, it's not about financial gain, but it's also about being part of the whiskey story. So you can make money while having fun and having your own piece of whiskey history in there. Also, as well as aging, the current trends are that whiskey changes, the value of whiskey can be affected by what wood it's put into, because the wood gives the whiskey the flavor ultimately. So you have Sauterne casks and rum and tequila casks that are so popular now, as sherry casks are becoming more difficult to come by, simply because of the fact that people drink less sherry. So sherry casks were once the dominant cask of flavor of choice, and they still are to a large degree. But there are all these new casks and finishes that also affect the pricing of it. So it's age, it's the finishing, it's all these fabulous things that go together to create the perfect bottle of whiskey. Why is it referred to as liquid gold? Well, it simply is one of those things that it grows in value. It keeps growing in value. It's something that is as investable as gold, because it's very straightforward to buy whiskey casks and sell them at the same time. To give you an example of why this liquid gold moniker is given to it, one of our clients earlier in this year, in March, had a cask of 93 Macallan, which he made an upside of 15% in the space of about 3 weeks, which is kind of really amazing if you think about it. But you know, these are very expensive casks of whiskey which got regauged into, so poured from one cask into another one, which makes it unlike any other investment. And as it gets older, it just becomes more and more expensive. Thus, the 93 Macallan, which made 15% ROI for that client in a very short period of time because it was sought after. So the expected return on investment from WCC is pretty straightforward, Chris, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think ROI, some of these numbers you see out there really drive headlines, but sometimes that makes our job a little bit harder. Just earlier today, I showed Alex something from my newsfeed through LinkedIn, where another whiskey broker was guaranteeing 33% ROI per annum. Like that's probably a little bit unrealistic. You know, sometimes it's this age-old story. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. You know, so I think, you know, more realistically is what we're seeing kind of what our customers and what the market recently, now we don't guarantee any of these numbers, is you're doubling your investment, you know, every 5 to 6 years. And that's more realistic in terms of 12 to 14% ROI if you look at it from a real number standpoint. So you want to make sure you're dealing with a reputable company like Whisky Cask Club. And a nice thing with us is we are the exclusive supplier to an MAS listed fund called the Whisky Cask Fund, which gives us additional credibility and also gives us additional buying power and access to whiskeys that we might not otherwise have access in order for you to be able to buy.
So I'd like to share a little bit about the Angel's Share, because it's important for people to understand what happens to that whiskey while it's in the barrels maturing. Not only does it add value, the age adding value, but it does evaporate. So the euphemism, as it's euphemistically called Angel's Share, this is the evaporation that affects whiskey. And it's one of those interesting points about it because it's a liquid and it does evaporate over time. So when whiskey is poured into the cask initially, the wood it's absorbed by the wood, which immediately gives it flavor. But the wood will absorb 3% of the whiskey as it's poured into the cask. Now, it's roughly 1 to 2% per annum for the first 12 years, and then around 1% per annum after that. Now, one thing to take into consideration that realistically you shouldn't really keep whiskey for more than 25 years. Well, you can, but you'll find that only half of the barrel is left of the original liquid after evaporation, which makes each bottle even more valuable, but you have to be very careful how to monitor it.
I always thought an interesting stat you told me, and I looked it up, was after 12 years in the cask, like how much of that is already bottled?
Well, it's a very good point because it's most of it.
Yeah, I mean 90+%.
Yeah, it's more like 99.5%. Yeah. Whiskey tends to get bottled relatively young because, you know, there's 1.6 billion bottles of whiskey consumed, Scotch whiskey, just Scotch whiskey consumed every year. That's over 50 bottles a second. So in the 15 minutes that this has been running, that's thousands, hundreds and hundreds of bottles, not thousands. So that's it gives you some indication that as it gets really old after this 5-year point, it suddenly becomes stratospherically rare, and thus also pushing the price up, which is another interesting fact behind the actual whiskey market, which again, to reiterate it, is hundreds of years old and being perfected as days go past. Talking about investment for the moment. So the reason that it's a particularly good investment is because it hedges against volatile investments. It rides the inflation, it's riding the inflation wave that's a global issue at the moment. You've got a situation where it's disconnected from the rest of the markets. It's not connected to equities. It's not connected to energy prices particularly. It is to a degree with energy prices because they need energy to make it. But the essential thing is you've got whiskey and you've got the rest of the market, and they are separate. They're not connected together. So it's a very nice hedge against more volatile investments.
Yep, and it's a hard asset. I mean, once you purchase a cask of whiskey, it's yours. So whether you decide to sell it in the future or even bottle it, it's something that is a hard asset that you own.
So there are intrinsic risks. What happens if we're not here? We've won the lottery or sold our millionth cask.
Yeah.
And so what happens if that happens? And Chris and I are sitting on a beach with our families somewhere in the Maldives or whatever. The casks are yours. They belong to the customer who buys them. Those casks reside in a bonded warehouse. That bonded warehouse is known to the owner of the cask. They know where their cask is lying. That's what they call it, is lying, because they're typically lying down. If the bonded warehouse then, for some reason, goes out of business, HMRC, which is His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, will inform the cask owner that they need to move their whiskey casks. I mean, typically the bonded warehouse would do that because they have all the details from the clients. So that would then be moved. So it's got to be reiterated that the cask belongs to the client. It's like going into a store and buying a bottle of whiskey. It belongs to you. This is a bottle of whiskey we bought. It belongs to us. The cask is exactly the same as this. When you have a cask of whiskey, it is the same as having a bottle of whiskey, because that's exactly what it is. It's just in larger volume. Effectively, what it comes down to is the fact that that cask belongs to somebody, and that makes it a tangible physical asset. What are the other risks? That what happens if whiskey demand implodes, like we were talking about pretty much at the beginning of the presentation? It's very unlikely to, and if it does, there's going to be a very good reason for it. And in any case, it's one of these asset classes that you can hang on to because it'll just be getting older. And then once the market were to pick up again, it would then be valuable again. The chances of it happening are infinitesimally small. It is a risk, and we need to point it out. Are the casks insured is a question that we get quite regularly. Yes, they are, because with every cask that the Whisky Cask Club sells, it comes with 5 years storage and insurance that covers that cask for 5 years against various things like damage, fire, theft, etc. So those are important issues that and matters that are important to understand. One other risk that has to be pointed out is FX. So this is a graph that I've put on the presentation from today. You can see it's pretty stable. Last September there was a bit of a wobble, but ultimately sterling is a stable tradable currency, and so you can see that the volatility is very low. So
yeah, look, this is what the number one things that we talk about. So how do you start your whiskey cask investment journey? So we have two main routes that people take. Now, the most popular one is buying single casks of whiskey as an investment. This is something that we work with our clients based on their budget. We take a look at what casks are available to us and how old they are, and in terms of something that fits their budget and fits their needs. Something that is a growing popular alternative investment choice. The other one that helps us in terms with our credibility and our buying power and overall access is we do also have, we're the exclusive supplier to an MAS listed whiskey cask fund. You can, if you want to learn more about this, we can introduce you to our bankers at Blair Road Capital, where the minimum investment is $50,000 US, and you have to be an accredited investor. So it gives you, I guess, overview in terms of exposure to the whiskey cask fund, unlike the whiskey cask investment where you own that cask of whiskey, and you can own multiple casks of whiskey that we have our clients invest in from across the globe. So that's some of the highlights in terms of what we do here at Whisky Cask Club. I mean, it's pretty simple, but I think there's just lots of choice, and we want to make sure that you are using a reputable broker like the Whisky Cask Club.
So we've got some processes and some Q&A to go through.
Yeah, so these are some of the most common questions that we get, Alex, especially from the sales teams. And number one, like, how does the investing work with the Whisky Cask Club?
So the first and most important thing is we sit down, the sales team will sit down, or your sales representative will sit down with you and discover what you're interested in, what are you looking for, what your budget is. We will work out what we think is a good recommendation. Once we have that information, then we will look at our stock list. If a client wants something particular that we don't have, we will attempt to find it. Once that happens, the process itself is very straightforward. The cask is reserved. It's chosen and say, I want this cask or these casks. We then reserve it. We send out a compliance form, which is important because that data goes to ultimately the bonded warehouses. So in case that Whisky Cask Club isn't here anymore, then that information is held at the bonded warehouses. An invoice is then generated using that data. Once the cask is paid for, we get to our next question, which is what proof of ownership do customers usually get? A certificate of ownership is issued, and a login to our client portal is delivered, so you can actually see where your cask is and what the current value is. It's an estimated value because obviously this is an OTC, over-the-counter market. Once that cask has been moved to our bonded warehouse, which is we have accounts at several bonded warehouses, one of which is V&C, which is near Glen Rothes in north of Edinburgh, about half an hour north of Edinburgh. Then that delivery order will basically give the customer the exact location of where their cask is. They can go to the bonded warehouse and make an appointment with them to examine the cask and draw some out of it should they want to. Then once the time comes to sell it after.
So on the ownership, so I think this is a question we get on this as well, is you get this certificate of ownership and then you get a delivery order once it's shifted to one of the bonded warehouses where you can go visit your cask if you so want to. How many names can go on one certificate?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we limit it to 3, simply because of the fact it becomes complicated at that point. It's better to have, if you want to have more than 3 people on that ownership certificate and on that delivery order, to run it through an SPV, which is a special purpose vehicle, which can be set up specifically to buy whiskey casks, and then those casks would be owned by the company, which would be on the documents.
Okay, so and most commonly you see one or two names on an ownership document.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so that kind of takes me into the most common question that I really get is, if I buy a cask of whiskey through the Whisky Cask Club, or I own a cask of whiskey from another broker that maybe I bought 5, 6, 10 years ago, what are the different exits that are available to me as an owner of a cask of whiskey?
It's another excellent question, Chris. The most common way that people exit is to sell it to a bottler or a blender. The blender's always looking out for stock, bearing in mind that blends of whiskey are the most commonly drunk whiskey in the world. 92% of all Scotch whiskey is blended. You have Johnny Walker Black Label, for example, that there's feedstock that we sell for that. There are 32 different single malts and one grain combination that go into making Johnny Walker Black. It varies for the different types of Johnny Walkers. That's the same with the Chivasses, the Teachers, and other blended whiskey. So there's always huge demand. Going back to that 1.6 billion bottles of whiskey consumed every year, you can see that there's obviously demand for this type of thing. Another exit strategy would be through auction. It's typically not the best way to do it because you won't get the best price for it. But if you want a quick exit, then that's one of the fastest ways to do it. In any case, selling a cask of whiskey through, if we help you sell it, which you're not obliged to sell it through us, but we would be grateful if you did, because then we kind of ask you to reinvest. Is to private investors like yourselves who quite frequently take them off other clients' hands. The distillery sometimes can buy it back in case they need stock, because again, going back to the 1.6 billion bottles of whiskey that are exported from Scotland every year, feedstock, and feedstock. Ultimately, if you want to bottle it yourself, you're more than welcome to.
Send it anywhere in the world, so you can bottle it, put your own private label on it.
That could be Chris.
Yeah,
Chris's Lagavulin
with my mustache.
Please let us know if you have any other questions. I think, Ben, you had one.
I don't have any directly from the audience at the moment. Just asking for a copy of the webinar, which, yes, we will be sending to everyone's email that signed up. So we'll send a recording of this as well. I think just you guys have covered a lot of general questions that we get on the sales team and from new time buyers of casks as well. I guess that maybe one is, are there any sort of hidden fees in the total cost of the cask? And in terms of the cost of insurance and bonded warehouse storage, is that built in? And what's the duration of that insurance and storage?
So when you buy a cask of whiskey from Whisky Cask Club, it comes with 5 years storage and insurance built into the price already. The prices will be going up for storage and insurance in the next year or so, but only very marginally. It's roughly going to be around £400 per 5-year period. Currently, it's sort of in the late 300s. So that is the only cost. It's not hidden. It's just included in the actual cask price itself.
And if you want to continue to store and keep an insurance policy at that bonded warehouse, you can choose to do so after 5 years, or you can basically renew the policy with us. How does that work?
So should you want to keep it more than 5 years, which many people do, then what we will do is extend the storage and insurance for another block of 5 years.
Yeah, the insurance comes in blocks of 5 and 10, so because it's a relatively low cost.
Yeah.
If it gets moved to a different bonded warehouse, so should you wish to remove your cask of whiskey from the bonded warehouse that it's in and put it somewhere else, you would have to get insurance and storage from that bonded warehouse. It would have to be bought anew.
Perfect.
But that's pretty uncommon unless you have a really specific reason to move your cask of whiskey.
Right, right. Stephen Bailey is asking, but it must be bottled in Scotland, correct? So I guess maybe we could talk a little bit about, obviously we can't move the entire wooden barrel out of Scotland, but the liquid can be moved. So if you're not bottling it, how else can you get the liquid out of Scotland?
You can't.
Yeah.
You need to have it bottled in Scotland. Currently, bottling times are 8 months to 1 year, simply because of the volume of bottles being produced on a second by second basis. That is the rule, that the whiskey has to be bottled in Scotland, and then it's released it can be shipped anywhere in the world.
So I think that raises an interesting point because it's in an HMRC bonded warehouse. When you buy a cask of whiskey and then you on-sell it, many years later, it's a non-taxable event. We're not tax specialists, but it's considered a wasting asset in the UK. And, if it never leaves bond, it doesn't, have duty or tax associated with it. If you bottle it and remove it from Scotland, that's when you have to pay duty and tax.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue. Tom Van Molkop just asked, what are the taxes at exit? And there is no tax on exit if it's transferred within a bonded warehouse.
If people want to import it, they will have to pay duty, and that varies country to country. In Singapore, it's 38 Singapore dollars per pure liter of alcohol. So you have to $88 per liter of alcohol. So you have to calculate that backwards, and it ends up at being around $38 per liter of whiskey, per bottle of whiskey, sorry. So in different countries it varies. In the US there's one tax, in Australia there's a different one. So it really depends on what the duty is on a country by country basis. Then there is typically sales tax and VAT or GST added to that price of the whiskey, plus the duty that's paid. Then you have that landed cost per bottle.
Yeah, and if you're looking at it as an asset class, especially Chris and myself are Americans, there's no capital gains tax essentially on this. So if you were to look at it as an asset class, it's actually performing better than some of the things that you have the options of investing to in the US. And upon your exit, obviously paying some capital gains on that profit that you're making. Anonymous attendee is asking, what is the average number of years you see people holding on to casks?
5+.
5+. I mean, there's a very strong likelihood that the cask will double in value within that 5-year period. However, we've got people that we work with who've been holding casks for 10, 15 years. It's typically around 5 years. It's a minimum hold of 1 year. When you buy anything, obviously you can sell it through somebody else, but we will not engage to sell it unless it's been held for 1 year, simply because of the fact that it's unlikely you'll make money on it in 1 year. But when you really start making money on it is after year 3.
And a follow-up question is new make versus aged whiskeys as an investment. I guess the question is, which one would we recommend? I think that there's kind of answers on both sides, Alex.
Well, it's also about budget. It depends on how much money somebody has to purchase a cask. Casks that are 5-10 years old tend to be more expensive than new make. It's reasonably linear in the fact that the casks do increase at a fairly constant rate until they kind of top out at sort of 20 odd years, and then they become scarcity. Then it really starts to take off. So it's not entirely linear, but it's largely linear, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with budget. I mean, it's, because look, if I buy a new make fresh in the barrel and it costs £4,000, and in 5 or 6 years it's worth 8,000, great, I've doubled my money, but if I had a little bit more capital up front, whether I bought multiple new makes or if I bought something that was, let's say, 5 or 6 years old, and then in that 5 or 6 year period, now you have a 10 to 12-year-old whiskey, like that's a very marketable time frame in terms of where we see exit strategies. Either people are buying new make and getting out of it, in the first 5 or 6 years, or they're buying something that's 4 to 7 years old now and then aging it for another 5 years. And then that's right in the wheelhouse for where a lot of these bottlers and blenders want their whiskey in that kind of 10 to 12-year age bracket.
Ben wanted to talk about some of the sales team that he's building at the moment, so to give more local coverage around the region.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking at some of the folks on this webinar, and it looks like there's a number of people from India here, some from Indonesia. We have some from Thailand as well. And we are currently building out a sales team with brokers in various countries throughout Southeast Asia. Alex and Chris are based in Singapore, and so am I. But we will have reps in India. We have a number of reps in India right now, and we're building out the team across the region to have some more localized and kind of one-on-one abilities to work with the brokers and to obviously get some of that attention that you need when you're really defining your investment horizon, the budget that you're looking at, and those types of things. That's pretty much it from the Q&A. We have John Tan's asking, when is the next similar Zoom session like this? That's a good question.
We will
I think
quite likely do one next month. We will send out invitations to it. This is being recorded, so there will be an email. Zoom will send out an automatic email to everybody so that they have a copy of the recording of this webinar. For more information, you can contact any of us on the screen, as listed on that screen. That art QR code with the Whisky Cask, I think it's quite funny.
It's pretty slick looking,
nice.
Alex. Pretty slick.
So you can snap on that, and it'll take you to the whiskycaskclub.com. But otherwise, please screenshot or take these numbers down to contact any of us directly. Let's say Chris and I are in Singapore.
Yeah, we do have a couple of tastings coming up too. I think
That's
Ben
true.
was
Yeah.
You were going to mention as well. One in Malaysia and one in Singapore. We look to start doing those on a more regular basis. Ben, you can kind of touch on Malaysia, but for Singapore, it's actually through the American Association. So you have to actually just go on the American Association Singapore's website, and you could sign up for our whiskey tasting that is going to be held on the 15th of November. Right in the middle of town on the second floor at Molly Malone's on Circular Road. And Ben, I think you guys have something coming up the week before in Malaysia as well.
Yeah, that's right. I just posted to the chat the links to the American Association event where you can sign up. I think for non-members, it's like a $40 sign-up fee, which is Wednesday the 15th from 7 to 9. And then a bit earlier in the month on November 9th, Alex is going to be coming up to Kuala Lumpur. We have a tasting on the Thursday, November 9th from 5 to 9 p.m. at a place called Wine Crew. The link to that location is also in the chat. And if you'd like to come, just ping me. My information is up there, just ben@whiskycaskclub.com. That's a free event, and we're going to be doing some whiskey tastings and also a couple of pitches from various startups. And then also we'll be doing a pitch from Whisky Cask Club as well. So those are the two events coming up. And yeah, I think we're likely to do another webinar next month, and maybe we can open it up to some folks that are interested in kind of talking with us in a group setting and asking questions kind of directly to us. More of a conversation now that some folks have a good sense of the foundation of what we do.
Also, we will be doing the draw for the bottle of Macallan that was offered as an inducement to come to the webinar. So the winner of that will be informed by one of the sales team within the next couple of days. So I think are there any more questions, Ben, in there?
It looks like it. I'm not seeing links. Okay. We have Gary asking, do you have any literature that can be sent to clients?
Absolutely. We'll contact you directly about that and send it to you.
Okay, great. I'm also hearing that you guys can't see the webinar chat, which is unfortunate because I've been posting there. So
We'll
chat
send it
is
out in the
disabled.
email to the attendees.
We'll say yes, exactly. We'll send everything out in the email to the attendees. But if that's
Yeah.
it, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and giving us your 40 minutes this afternoon. And Sláinte, and we hope to see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys. Thank you.